ready
Totally.
to do this? Okay. So here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Deirdre Fay. Deirdre, welcome. Welcome back.
Delighted to be here.
Awesome. So Deirdre Fay is a psychospiritual author, coach, and trainer with 40 years of experience exploring the intersection of trauma, attachment, yoga, and meditation, which she calls a modern-day Bodhisattva training. Healing, then, is not an accident, but the sure result of a consistent and persistent practice that develops a solid, steady, secure self. Deirdre uses an integrative approach which Chris Germer calls a radically positive approach to healing trauma. Deirdre, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, as you know.
So, before we get going here, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I did all my work. When I heard that 40 years, I mean, am I really that old? Yes. Okay. So when I actually started my training when I lived in an ashram. And that's where I got the understanding that of being in a body. I don't think I knew what it was like to be in a body before. And it's also, as I felt safer and safer where my own history erupted. I didn't know I had a trauma history. So when it was time for me I had done a certain amount of healing and I needed to do more, and I also wanted the understanding of it. This is when trauma was really just being understood as a field or a contemporary field. And so I went to school, I got a degree, and then I was working in one of the big teaching hospitals in the Boston area, and I was doing my training there. And somebody had been in one of the workshops I'd done, one of the big conferences I'd done, and wanted to know what it would be like to teach people on the dissociative unit trauma, what it was like to have meditation. Could they do it? What would it be like for them to do yoga? And I was curious because I thought, can I really take what I've learned and apply it? And so I started working there. And then Bessel Ventricle heard about the work that I was doing. And I joined his clinic there where I got to know all the greats, and Janina Fisher and I and Bessel Ventricle had an office together. So we was really right in the thick of it all.
Wow.
And Bessel asked me to start leading groups. And so that really became what I call the becoming safely embodied skills. And Janina would send her clients and say, what are you doing there? The people are getting so much better faster.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And I thought, what is going on? Why is this so different? And even now, years later, I don't want to calculate the years at this point. What is it that's different? And I really think it's about operationalizing the theory. There's so much theory. And as therapists, we're out there training, and we end up with so much. But then how do we apply it? And that's where we get stuck. We're in it and we're stuck. And frankly, our clients are stuck too. They want to be attuned to. In fact, I was just talking to a consultee the other day, and I said, what is so critical and why our clients even come to us in the beginning is to be attuned to. But that's almost like a sacred gift now in this world, or busy world where we're driving and pressured. And so people don't pause and just be with. As therapists, we're trained to do a protocol. How many sessions do we have? And so we try to funnel people into the protocol. But what everybody needs, and one of the reasons why trauma is even a problem, is because nobody heard that they were hurting, that something was wrong inside. And of course, the client wants to be healed, lickety split. We all want that, right? But it takes so much time. But the key piece is if somebody is like, wait a minute, let me just get it. I just felt this inside. Something just happened here. And we pause. And that slowing down allows us to enter the moment and be with somebody. And we drop our training, which is hard to do, but if we let it go and stop worrying about it or trying to do it right, and we just, something's happening here. Something's happening. What is happening? It's like trying to untangle and one of those little clotted balls. It's like, okay, well, this strand goes here. And when we do that, a client starts to feel heard and understood. And so years ago, when I did 13 years of training with Dan Brown, who, it's such a sad thing that he's left the world, because he's really was brilliant and thoughtful, and he really trained me in attachment theory and its application. And again, it was like, okay, how do I operationalize this? And one of the things that came out of it were these fundamental attachment needs, and attunement is one of the key pieces, that somebody can just be there with us.
Deirdre, you are speaking my language. I love it. Seriously, love it. I want to go back, if we may, to the point when you started doing this, in that with the dissociative people who are experiencing dissociation. What did you do specifically? What were you doing?
Oh my God. I remember trying to do simple yoga postures and simple. This would have been in the 90s, so there wasn't a lot. At that time, I think there were 2 academic articles about trauma.
I mean, did you just like feel like this might be something, or what?
No, well, it's mostly because of my own history. How come I had been able to meditate for hours a day, do yoga? I did yoga multiple times a day. And then when my trauma history erupted, it was like chaos. I didn't want to get out of bed, and I was like, what happened? What happened? If in yoga, we say the body is a temple for the soul. But I did not live in a temple at that moment. I was disrupted. So that was my opening quest. And so I would take things. But all right, so at that point, I had years of experience of doing yoga and meditation. So I would take simple things and try it with these women on the dissociative unit, and it freaked them out. And so I thought, okay, we have to
Freaked him out in a, like, I don't want to do this way.
It opened up the doorway too quick and too fast.
Right. Okay.
And so how do we slow it down? How do we really take one tiny piece of it? And when people started doing the becoming safely embodied skills, it was not about having a grand theory. It's how do we make it so small and so simple that somebody can take that next step without it being a big hiccup or a big problem. It's like the natural next step. And so I think that's really how we heal, is by taking apart these big theories and finding what's essential and what's next and but it's small. It's not like, we can't take it too fast. So anyway, that's what I started doing. And I think that's what helped people. Once they could deconstruct their inner world, they could construct it in a way that worked for them.
What you said reminded me of recently, when I decided that I needed to start seeing a therapist again. I reached out to the therapist I was seeing. She was no longer seeing clients, but she recommended 3 people. I called each of them, and one after the other, and I'm sure they were competent, but one after the other spent the time telling me their modality and what they were going to do with me. I'm going to sneeze for a second. Excuse me.
I totally know that problem.
And I thought to myself, I don't care about your modality. I want a person. I want a person. It's like, exactly what you're saying. I need that, So yeah, I totally appreciate what you're saying. So, okay. I wanted to talk to you. You're going to be presenting through the Wisdom Circle the Academy of Therapy Wisdom there. Now, what are you going to be presenting on specifically? What is the title of your workshop?
Oh my God, you're
Or
going to
what's it going to
ask
be on?
me.
No, just tell me what's
It's going to be
okay.
exactly on this
No titles.
embodied attachment. Like, and I'm kind of gotten away from having a curriculum and more about attuning. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. What happens right now? How do you know? What happens inside you? How do you know? One of the key things our clients are missing is trusting that what they see, what they know, what they hear, what they smell, that they know something. Our world is so much about the scientific research and the academic journal, but we forgot, like, this person, both me as a therapist, but also the other person that's there, is like, they know something. And this is where yoga meditation is so powerful, because from that perspective, that person knows. They know themselves. They are the embodiment. Their soul, if you want to call it that, has come into this lifetime and is directing from inside. If we learn to listen to that voice, and certainly IFS has done a wonderful job at helping many of us learn how to use that skill of being with what in IFS we call self. And so how do we return to that? And not through a protocol, but even just listening and attuning and being with, and realizing that people have a native curiosity. And what I've come to trust is that our life actually is its own blueprint. So we're triggered, right? Which doesn't get triggered. We get triggered, but the trigger is not where we should spend the most of our life. The trigger is saying, there's something else. Come on, pay attention. There's more over there.
For example, give us an example. What you're talking about.
So if somebody says something and you get activated into all the thoughts and history, and our history comes up and it's encapsulated in that. And we could, and as therapists and as clients, we've spent years sort of delving into what's the problem and how is it getting embedded into us. But what if that trigger, that pattern is saying, okay, you don't have to live like this. It could be something else. You don't have to be angry here. You don't have to be resistant. You don't have to be disorganized and overwhelmed. What is wanting to happen? Somebody I was working with the other day moved to a new community and they can't seem to find the people they want to hang out with. Simple little
I think that's
thing.
me. I think you were talking. Oh my God. Okay, what happened? How did they
So
fix it?
what happens for most of us in that situation is we get like, oh my God, look at what's wrong here. I'm not getting met. I don't belong. Where do I fit in? And we're caught in that loop, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But what could happen there is say, okay, what do I want? And what I really believe is that when we're in that place, I don't belong, it's because we want to belong. But we have not learned or awakened, or I'm not sure what the right word is, sorted out what it would be like for us to belong, because we never belonged, let's say. I never had reassurance or soothing and comfort. So then I do all kinds of other things because I don't know what it'll be like in my body to be soothed, to just like have my viscera let go, So the trigger, like I don't belong, we could land in that and swirl in that, or we could say, okay, what would it be like to belong? How would I know inside myself if I belonged? And what happens to all of us, therapists or clients, is we go back to the known and say, but it's not that way. And we hang out in that instead of saying, okay, let me carve out a new path here. I want to belong. What would belonging look like? Well, I don't know. I use this example a lot. I had a client a long time ago that was African American that grown up in a really, really dissociative family. The whole family was dissociative. Now, this person was very, very high functioning, extremely high functioning in the world. But this person believed they couldn't be in relationship because, to put it bluntly, men are perpetrators. That was the belief that was encoded. So anytime the longing inside came out to be in a relationship, it was a triggering and activating because no, you can't, because you're just going to get hurt. And words would swirl in her head and memories and associations. So then we started saying, okay, you want to be in a relationship. Here's the trigger. Men are perpetrators, but what you want is a relationship. You want to be connected. So at that time, Barack Obama was the US president, and we said, so she liked Barack. And I said, so when you look at Barack and you see him with his girls, what in you, do you think he's perpetrating these girls? No. So we confronted that old pattern and say, so what would that be like to be at the other end of that, to have somebody, what will you see? What will you feel? What will you hear? What do you know going on inside you? What do you know coming from outside? The signal. It's about repatterning those tiny little signals. And when you begin to you start orienting to that instead of the old. So if you want to belong, what would it be like? Well, I don't know. I've never belonged. Okay, well, who do you know that belongs? Well, I don't know. And you're going to unpack all that until you begin to see, if I belonged, somebody would welcome me, would want to see me. I would feel safe inside. What would safety feel like? How would you know in your body that you feel safe? And you really rework it at that incredible level. And Lisa Feldman Barrett is one of the researchers on emotion, and she has done a great work on unpacking this scientifically. And when I read her book, I thought, oh my God, this is what yoga meditation is all about, is understanding these mechanisms of how we put together the world that we live in.
Wow.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's really hard because so much of even those micro movements you're talking about requires us, people who've experienced trauma, to trust ourselves, trust our feelings, to trust our beliefs, even to get beyond that.
Yes. And so then it's like, well, how do you know when you trust yourself? Yeah, I reworked this with a consultee recently. And it's like, okay, how do you know what you know? Not what the world is telling you, but what do you know? How do you be inside yourself and trust that? And that is a huge thing. We all know that. You know that. I know that. Our clients certainly don't think it's possible for them, but it is. It is. And I think one of the things that's making me sad now about the therapeutic trainings that we go into is that it's about the other person. It's not about you trusting you. And this is where attachment theory is so
Say that again.
critical.
What do you mean?
Well, a child, I think of it as the developmental task of becoming an adult. As a child, we built a self by being mirrored and reflected from the outside in. But as an adult, I need to know who I am so I can be in relationship with myself, so that I can be in relationship with you. But what happens is most of us are still caught in that. You should be with me in a way that makes me feel good, or that I can heal. It's like, so that the outside world is supposed to affect us, but it's about, how do I know what I know so that I can be there with you? And this is the cauldron of every therapy. Every therapy has this moment where we kick and scream until finally we say, okay, let me look at myself. Let me stay inside myself. What's here? What do I know? And that's where things can start changing.
In the present.
Yeah. And so when we start realizing, like, okay, I didn't get my attachment needs met. That's why I don't feel secure inside, or I don't feel solid. I don't feel steady. So how do I do that? How do I build a self inside instead of asking the world to deliver that to me? It's like, this is my task. Okay, what do I need? I need to belong. I need soothing. I need comfort. I need reassurance. Of course you do. Of course you do. We all do. But these are so fundamental that we're ashamed of them. And when I worked with my own shame, which was like brutal, I realized that shame is an attachment wound. And the reason it's so physiologically horrific is because it's encoded at these subcortical levels. We don't think about it. But if I don't belong, the felt experience of not belonging is excruciating. You know, if I feel like I'm going to be shamed all the time because something's wrong with me, because I'm not wanted, nobody sees the best in me, nobody wants to hear what I have to say, whatever it is, it's something is wrong. It's not a thought form. It's horrifying. But once we begin to validate, of course you need to be heard. Of course you need to be seen. Who do you want to be seen by? How do you want that seeing to happen? What would that experience look like out there? And what would it feel like inside? And then we really can start changing, because we own these fundamental things. I feel like, shame, I feel like now I have healthy shame, but I don't have that excruciating awfulness, because I was like, oh, I'm feeling ashamed. I want something. I needed something that I'm not getting in the moment. Okay, that's an indicator to me. How do I have that? Or am I looking in the wrong place? Do I need to turn my gaze over here and see what else? In workshops, I did a whole experience about the attachment mirror, literally drawing out what if I look in the mirror of life, what do I see? What do I hear? This is what the old model. But what do I want? And how do I design that? How do I begin looking in a different direction? And most of us don't feel like we have that choice. We feel trapped in our lives.
Oh,
but
man.
we can begin to see, like, okay, just if we turn and look over there, what is there? What would that look like, feel like?
So what you're saying is, a lot of us, when we're kind of immersed in our own shame, for example, we're encumbered by it, we're oppressed by it, we don't know where to move, how to act, what to feel. And you're suggesting, if I'm hearing you correctly, we're inviting people to, you're asking a question, first of all, which gets the mind thinking about something else and looking in a different direction. And for the first time, you're thinking, what do I want? How do I want to feel? Is it even possible? And to some of these questions, a lot of us might say, I don't know. No one's
But
ever
we do know.
asked.
That's right. We do know. And the reason we know is because we know we don't want that. We know we're ashamed of that. We know we're hurting here. But we just haven't known or had somebody validate or listen to us or encourage us to see what's over there. What else? What does our heart want? I heard something the other day that Henry Miller, the writer, said when he started painting. He said that creativity for him was about wiggling outside of a straitjacket. And I thought, oh my God, I so know that. Our beliefs and the right way to do things is a straitjacket. And we think that's the only way to live. And that's all that is possible. And yet there's so much more. But we're not encouraged in our world to wiggle out of that. We're encouraged to stay in the line and do it right. I have a lot of energy. I could say other words, have a lot of energy, and it can be quite ebullient at times. And I actually had somebody tell me, one of my mentors at one point, that I'm uncontained. And for years I thought, what does that mean? I really oh my God, I'm uncontained. But the reality is, one of the great things that I have is that when I'm leading a group of people, because I have so much energy, I am staying inside myself, but I'm feeling the room, and I can pick up what's happening. I don't know how it happens, but I know what's going on. And so I know it makes a difference. But that idea that I'm contained was that especially from a mentor.
For those who are listening to this, like myself, who are just really connecting with what you're saying. I mean, but maybe don't feel that we can wiggle out of that straitjacket, you know? Um,
Maybe you can
for
just wiggle then.
maybe just wiggle, begin to wiggle. And
Yeah.
that obviously that's going to mean different things for different people.
Just try something different.
And does for what you're saying, does this require an action
Oh
or
my God, that's a great question. I don't know.
or does it require maybe just beginning to feel, right?
Yeah,
Beginning to say, what am I feeling right now? Oh, I don't
right.
know.
Well, but you do know. And that's what I would say to myself. That's what I would say to you or to anyone. If you do know, what do you know? And that's so primary, because when we say, I don't know, I don't know. And I think Carol Gilligan said this way years ago about women's feminism. It's like women are taught not, girls are taught not to know, but we do
Mhm.
know. What do you know? I know I don't like this. I know that I'm scared. I know that I want to feel alive, but nobody said it was possible. I know that I want to be seen. I know that I want to be quiet. How do we validate that and say, okay, you're right? That's one tiny step. Your
Mhm.
soul, your inner guidance is saying something. And then what's the next step? And always, life is always showing us a next step. We can't not have
Mhm.
a next step.
As we kind of wind down here, what does this work that you're talking about, this uh, therapy, this approach, what does this require of the therapist?
Wow. I don't know. Sure, I know what the question.
Well, in other words, what I'm hearing is a lot of self-awareness, right? I mean, you had years of experience in yoga and meditation that you're bringing to this. And uh, I'm guessing that this requires a knowing of oneself, an ability not
Do you think I would
to.
like this?
I agree, but I think a lot of times, a lot of therapists cling to this modality,
Yes.
and wear it as a kind of a
Right.
crown and let
Right.
that lead. And obviously, there's a lot of benefit to
Yes.
knowledge and modalities. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm hearing you say, there's an organicity to it, a humanness to it, a willingness to really, and an invitation to really slow down. But that requires something of the therapist as well.
Hmm. Well, I'm interested in this because I just talked to somebody the other day, and they were like, well, what do I do when a client says something about going in the body and I freak out and I get scared and I freeze up? I'm like, okay, so right in that moment, what do you know? I'm freezing up. Is that inside you? Is that in the other person? Is that happening between you? What if you even make that like, oh, gosh, I know as we're talking about this, I'm freezing up a little. I wonder what that's about. Like, what if we didn't have to know?
Mhm.
Oh, I almost felt teary saying that. Like, what if the pressure to be perfect and right instead of being with it. And we know from the research that this is what kids are missing so much, especially in this day of social media where parents are on the phone all the time and not attuning right to the kid or just being with a kid. That moment of tiny bit of presence doesn't have to be all the time. It doesn't have to be, it's just like, oh, there you are. That communicates something more than almost anything.
Deirdre, unbelievable. You are speaking the truth. I mean, seriously, love it. This is what you do. And you've been doing it. How did, just before we got to get so many questions, how did you get to a point where you're like, you know what, I want to become a therapist? Would this start from this very early age? Were you that person who everyone went to and spoke?
No. I think it was at the ashram, and it was, it's a process of awakening. And then my own trauma came up. I was like, what the heck is happening to me? And I started seeing that so many people that came, we had, thousands of people a year come through it. And many of them had issues and they didn't want to open up too much, or they'd open up and then they'd shut down real quick. And it's like, what's going on? What is this? So yoga and meditation says something is possible and we're not living that possibility. What's going on? And so going to school and doing that, it was really a quest for my own healing. And then it was like, okay, so I don't know what it is. But I think more people have it than not.
Right.
We just don't give each other the chance to drop in.
Deirdre, what's the best way for people to reach out, get in touch with you?
They can use the books. They're amazing. When people buy them, the first year it was out, I think we sold 35,000 that year. There's also, I have an attachment book from Norton. It's here. That's for therapists. It's a little bit more heady and more full of research. And my website is dfay.com. Very simple, dfay.com.
Okay. And I'll have all those linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com, as well as a link for Academy of Therapy Wisdom for the Trauma Circle, where you'll be offering a workshop there. Awesome, man. I'm just so glad you're here. Love to have you back. And we need this. Our world needs what you're talking about now. And it's this slowing down. It's this being willing and able and inviting each other to look and listen and see. And thank you for being here.
I want to say one thing though. I don't show up except because you're showing up. It's not me. It's us. You and I are entering a sacred space where that is allowed to flourish. And that's what's possible in our world. And that's what's possible in our offices. So
appreciate that. All right, Deirdre. Take care.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.